Myself and my family had moved from Washington, D.C. to Catonsville, and I had picked my daughter up after school one day from second grade and took her about 3 o'clock for a snack before we went home. And we were sitting in a fast food restaurant on the main street in Catonsville, having a Coke and I think some fries, and my daughter leaned across the table from me and whispered, "Dad, we're the only normal people in here." She said, "But don't look." And she was, in second grade, and so I looked anyway, and she was real embarrassed, and lo and behold, we were the only normal people. And my definition of normal is fairly broad, but there were 7 or 8 tables occupied by a couple, 2 or 3 by couples, and the rest by individuals, and these people were in various states of doing some rather peculiar things, and talking to themselves and building things out of the sugar cases and the sweetener cases, and just doing all kinds of odd things, making something out of a folded newspaper, and then trying to sail it across the room. This is in a public restaurant. And I had no idea what was going on, and we finished and left, and I didn't feel comfortable asking anybody in the restaurant, any of the kids that worked in there, what was happening. But a couple days later, I met a neighbor, a school teacher, about 2 or 3 houses up from where I lived, and I was talking to him. I had introduced myself to him, and I happened to mention this strange incident down the road at the local fast food restaurant. And he went, "Oh, yeah, he says, "That's no problem. Those are the Spring Grove people." And I said, "Well, what do you mean the Spring Grove people?" And he said, "Well," he says, "those are the LSD, those are the people that the government tested LSD on back in the 50s and 60s. And he said, there's like maybe 20 of them that are still wandering around town. They're totally harmless, but they do act quite peculiar at times." And so that really piqued my interest, and quickly found out that Spring Grove was actually sort of the locals' name for what is formally known as the Maryland State Psychiatric Institute. And it wasn't far from my house. It was maybe 5 miles from my house, in a beautiful, pristine setting in the woods, and it's like a rolling campus and pine trees and a couple ponds, and I researched it actually before I looked into the Olson story, and found out that it was the oldest psychiatric institute, and that it had been formed, I think, don't hold me to this, in the late 1700s for women that were going through menopause. And at that time, menopause was considered some kind of severe mental affliction, and so women were sent off to Spring Grove, where they lived out their remaining years, and their husbands could remarry or whatever.